Hey everybody, George from Redox here, coming at you from Health Further 2017 in Nashville. Today I'm joined by Patel, President of Healthbox, and we're going to talk a little bit about the evolution of Healthbox and digital health accelerators in general. Okay. So, Redox has been a member of many accelerators, and we work with a lot of digital health applications, entrepreneurs who are looking at these programs to get a lot of insights and to help them grow their organization. Healthbox has actually had an interesting transition over the last couple years from a more traditional accelerator to now partnering with groups like Intermountain directly to help them with innovation. Can you talk a little bit about that evolution and why?
Yeah, sure. I think the best place to start is kind of why we got started, and then that leads to how we got to where we are today, because it was kind of trying to solve a problem, right, and building the solution. And originally the problem that we were trying to solve was, so we were founded by Sandbox Industries, which managed the Blue Cross Venture Partners their venture fund. And they had a strict payer focus, and also had the size of checks that they were writing was not small enough to be able to invest in some of the earlier stage things. And so there was lack of early stage capital. This was back in 2009, 2010, right? Lack of access to early stage capital, and then they were looking for some way to get into the provider space because they were a payer-focused fund. And so because there are things that are in the hybrids, there's provider-sponsored health plans, and so that's how Healthbox got started. So we said, there are untapped ecosystems around the country and around the world, really, where a lot of the large corporate healthcare players, health systems, big pharma companies, payers, what have you, medical device, anyone, right? Like, different cities have different things that they're known for or good at, but there's nothing that really coordinates them together. And so if we bring them together in these micro funds, the things that you invest into companies through the traditional accelerators, then one, we can get them to work together. So the money that was investing does not move the needle for these big organizations, and so these were $1 million, $1.5 million at largest funds to invest in 10 companies, right, and to fund the operations of the accelerator. So it was really just getting them to sit around the table together and talk about what they were excited about in terms of what was changing in health technology, how IT was changing what its role could be in healthcare. And as we started doing that, we went to, started in Chicago, which is where we were based. We saw great potential there. And we came to Nashville for one of them, Salt Lake City, Boston, did a bunch in Florida, Tel Aviv, and London. And people ask, why didn't you go to San Francisco? We're like, we didn't need to go to San Francisco, right? Like, there was already plenty happening there. We needed to go to places where we felt we could catalyze an ecosystem. And that's why we never stay in a place, right? So we didn't sit there and base operations and build a group there. We would have multiple programs if we felt like we still had work to do. But sometimes we would just come in once or twice, do 2 programs over the course of 2 years, and move on. That all happened over the course of 3 years. And what, interestingly, and partly because of what we were doing and what other groups were doing, was kind of more of a macro trend of there was more and more accelerators being started, as kind of the topic here, right? And so when we started, we were one of 3. It was us, Rock Health, and Blueprint Health. And when we got out of the game, there were over 150, right? And a couple things happened there, right? You have kind of, from an economic standpoint, it ends up being a race to the bottom. People are giving more money for less equity, and so it's difficult for a business to remain in business. The second thing that was happening, and this is where I think the accelerators really continue to grow and should play, which is being funded kind of in public-private partnerships or just purely by kind of the cities. And kind of you still have the corporate sponsorships because they derive a lot of value there, but generally that's what we're seeing in a lot of different cities. You see the cities funding these because of economic development. You see state funding, you see federal funding, and then you see nonprofits funding them as well. So I think that's the real role of kind of who should continue to grow that space. I think there is a role for accelerators, because just the kind of the networks they bring together, and that still access to really early stage capital is important, and it's a vital part of the ecosystem.
And then specifically with the partnership with Intermountain, so you have the fund, so you're working closely with them. Can you talk a little bit about what that allows you to do that you couldn't prior?
Yeah, so that's kind of, that's part of the evolution story, but I didn't actually get to. So the reason that we got out of the accelerators was not necessarily just because it was the saturation. We had a good brand and we were still attracting good companies. It was more that the needs of our partners, the limited partners, were changing. So we did our last accelerator program in Salt Lake City. So it wasn't the one that you guys were part of. That was the next evolution of the accelerator. But we actually did a traditional accelerator program. Intermountain was the anchor LP in that one. And what they said was, we actually have internal needs to drive innovation, and we think that building a program like this within our organization might be a way to catalyze our own internal innovation culture. And then at the same time, they're like, we also need to think about how do we've been investing in venture funds as LPs and have active roles in some of these like Heritage, HEP, Ascension, right? But if we bring that team and that core competency in-house, then we can take more of the learnings of the deals that you do, the deals that you don't do, and we can have Healthbox as a partner in doing that. And so that was really the reason why we got started there. And what it allows us to do is have a lens of really deeply understanding what are the problems that providers and payers, because it's an integrated delivery network, are facing, and then helping the kind of the frontline employees, physicians, back data center employees. What are the challenges they face? What solutions are they not finding on the market that meet their needs? Help them thinking through just the standard buy, build, partner process, right? And so being on the inside to help them drive commercialization and impactful solutions for themselves, and then being on the venture side of things to their innovation fund, and then bridging those two things together is a really unique marriage, not one that a lot of organizations have, but we're seeing that happen more and more often. Us being on both sides of it really helps shape our broader perspective, and I think from a partner to both startups and to healthcare organizations provides a perspective that not many have.
So then, we work with a lot of groups at all stages of growth. So now that you've had this additional feedback and relationship with Intermountain, is there one piece of advice that you would give to an organization? Let's say they've raised, a seed fund, and they're working with a partner. Is there like a piece of advice you'd give them to say, before you get to that next stage, you really need to get this like totally set up, otherwise you're going to run into roadblocks when you're actually going to those final sales?
So you're talking about a startup that's raised a seed round?
Yeah, let's talk about a startup.
I would say that if they're intimately involved in the clinical side of healthcare, then there's no substitute for spending time with the end users. And I think a lot of time, there's focus on who do we need to get in front of to be able to get this sale. And that's a very different question and a different question to answer than how do I need to get this to be, my product to be sticky with my end user. They may not be just really understanding the stakeholders. And more so for entrepreneurs that have not been in healthcare, doing a quick stakeholder analysis of who my buyers are, who my influences are, how am I going to get this introduced and stick around, and then how do I assuage any concerns that a more conservative health system might have about adopting me. So picking the customers correctly, not necessarily just the ones that are in your own backyard, but that can be really helpful as well. So I would say don't have such a strong focus on getting that initial first sale. Focus on getting the product right first.
Perfect. And then finally, so we are at Health Further 2017. It's the future of health. You're an impressive guy and with a really unique perspective. Is there anything that's really exciting you, either you saw here at the conference this week or just in general?
Yeah, I think the different constituents that Marcus and the team here have pulled together is really unique from I know they don't like calling it a conference, so from a festival standpoint.
Yeah. Lots of music.
There's music, which is different, and it's kind of fun. And I don't know, I think that there's just a lot of really serendipitous conversations happening as you just wander around here. Like last night, met a lot of people that I had seen before at various other bigger conferences like HIMSS and whatnot, but actually had real conversations with them here. You go to enough of these things, you see people and they look familiar to you, but you don't actually know them.
Yeah.
And I think what they've done with this one, and I hope that as this grows, I hope it doesn't get too big, because once it gets too big, then you lose that intimacy.
Yeah.
And we need more intimate gatherings like this in which people can walk away with not just kind of networking, but actually have deepened relationships in which they may be able to do something together or leverage each other in some way in whatever they're trying to do in this innovation space, because it's really hard and we all need to work together.
Totally. Neil, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
That's it from Health Further 2017. Catch you next time.